Welcome, dear listeners. Today we have a new guest, Neil. Thank you for coming for the introduction podcast. Please tell us more about yourself and why should people listen?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Neil Morris. I've been in technology for over 25 years across a number of industries. And most recently was CIO of Maxar Technologies, which is now became Vantor and Paul Aerospace and Redaptive. Been working in you know, machine learning, various aspects of AI for well over a decade. Obviously, last couple of years, really focusing on the generative AI and some of those items. So I've really spent a lot of time digging in with different organizations on their AI strategy and what works and what doesn't work, and really kind of found why AI fails and kind of what organizations can do to make sure that their AI projects and programs actually produce the meaning results that everyone's looking for.
Super solid. Let's start unpacking your insights. So you've been CIO twice and you've shipped AI into production at defense companies, aerospace, which is very interesting that you mentioned. Now you're doing energy infrastructure and you've spent like the last year writing very openly and publicly about AI governance and AI governance theater, and that it's all just it's really a theater. So I want to start right there. In your career, was there a moment that you have experienced where you were inside a real company, then you build the governance and everybody wanted it, but the revenue was showing something else? Like there has been initiatives saying that, hey, we need to pursue the revenue, which went in contrary with the governance that you have built. And if it is, what did you do at that moment?
Yeah. So fortunately, a lot of the companies that I've been in, governance has been very foundational to kind of what they do and how they do it because they were working in some more regulated environments. So that governance model was super important to them, right? And aligned with their core missions and what they sold and brought to the public. Where
Hmm.
I've seen the breakdown more is in conversations with other organizations that are struggling to find how to build in that appropriate governance, right? And it's really a lot of times a lack of governance itself, right? Or a lack of understanding how to apply governance in their
Hmm.
decision making process and where they implement things. So they start trying all sorts of different items without understanding the full implications to their data, right? To their security, to their hardly building an asset, right? Are they
Hmm.
accepting a liability? And just really that lack of understanding. More in the companies that I talk to and consult with, kind of outside of my normal kind of CIO roles.
It's very interesting because usually, whenever you have a big innovative project in mind, you have to do some kind of pilot, some kind of POC. And you've obviously, throughout your career, plus with your consulting business, you've seen a lot of different companies, a lot of different pilots, a lot of different initiatives. What usually is moving the needle when you have a pilot? Because everybody can plan. mm, And in my experience with AI, with any kind of initiative that you do, stress tests a lot of things, and a lot of things can be unexpected. You can prepare for one thing, but then once you start piloting a certain solution, an LLM, generative AI, doesn't matter, it's a totally different story. So, what was what's usually the thing that nobody really prepares for? So once they start doing the pilot, they have a surprise in the first week.
Yeah, I think especially when you talk AI, everyone is looking at it, and a lot of people are throwing things at the wall and trying to figure out what works, what will save money, what will be more efficient, what will help people accelerate delivery of code.
Mm-hmm.
And so they start a lot of pilots, right? I think one of the biggest holdups for people and the biggest surprises is they haven't really done enough due diligence before the
Mm-hmm.
pilot to even really articulate their hypothesis of what they expect to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing when you start a pilot and we have a hypothesis that this tool, this process, this implementation will result in X. And we know how to track it and we know how to monitor it and we have KPIs around it. And you
Mm-hmm.
can understand where it starts to go off the rails and make a decision to terminate the pilot or continue on with it and potentially roll it out into production. But in AI, you don't have that a lot of times. So people start a pilot without any real clear success criteria. And then so they just continue on and they find these little issues of like, ooh, Like, yeah, we had some data exposed that we didn't want exposed. We're now finding we have bad data. Let's go fix that. Or like this was unexpected behavior. Let's go fix that. Right. Without clear accountability guardrails or KPIs around them. So they're
Hmm.
just allowed to continue and drain company resources. And that drain on company resources and attention, right, I think is really what I find surprises most people. I mean, the tools are continuously getting better, right? And the workforce is getting more adept at using them and they get more creative with how, right? So if you don't do the change management, the explanations, you don't put that governance around them front, you don't understand the KPIs or your hypothesis, and things go off the rails really quickly. And then they're just allowed to linger in a lot of organizations.
Interesting. Can you expand a little bit on that from the perspective of your seven pillar framework, specifically in the light of governance is usually, it's hard to build governance upfront, like a preventive governance, because especially right now, when you see that AI and new initiatives are launching literally every week. So the pace of change and the pace of adaptation scales so much faster than the governance can scale. What would you recommend in the light of the seven pillar framework to folks that want to build this governance as they go? So where there's still room for the innovation, but they're not breaking the business or not breaking any rules.
Yeah. And I think there are different layers of governance, right? So in kind of the seven pillar framework that I laid out, it really starts with strategy,
Hmm.
right? And it's corporate strategy, enterprise strategy, but then also an AI strategy that ties directly to it.
Hmm.
And strategy is, durable and it lasts, right? If your strategy is changing as an organization at the pace of AI, you're not going to be able to keep up. Or if you have an AI strategy, or you're just trying to implement AI outside of a strategy, you kind of go everywhere, right? And you don't have specific objectives. And I think of organizations that are serving a specific market and they have a mission and they have a strategy, right? That's durable and kind of gives you that North Star, right? If
Hmm.
you can get everyone aligned on that and then the leadership aligned behind it, which is kind of my pillar two of we all now know where we're going. We have a goal. Right. So you
Hmm.
can look at those AI things, those AI tools, those capabilities, which is kind of pillar three, and understand how they would or would not move the company strategy forward. And if it doesn't move the company strategy forward, you need to ask, why are you doing it?
Hmm.
You read a lot of books that talk about strategy and leadership is really about the art of saying no, right? Because there's so many good things that you can do. What are the things that actually move the business? So you got to figure out the capabilities that align to that strategy, get the leadership aligned, and then you can kind of do those pilots and
Hmm.
really having that structure to make sure that people are asking, is this aligned with our strategy? Do these capabilities move it forward? That's the level of governance that I think you need before you start a pilot. I don't think you need hard governance on strict validation and cab processes and all of these kind of items. You do have to have a little bit of it to say, how much risk are we accepting, right? And take that risk-based approach from
Hmm.
a company data and organization, but that can be light, right? And if you're only starting one or two pilots, right, with clear KPIs and clear alignment to strategy, I don't
Hmm.
think it's too much to ask. If you have 30, 40, 50 different pilots that are being done all over the organization for
It's
very
a mess.
tactical kind of things, I don't think there's a really good way to keep up with it. And you just keep pivoting all over the place and they naturally don't lead to the value that you're trying to achieve because you're just adding tools, which will accelerate and amplify whatever you're doing, both
Hmm.
good or bad.
Hmm.
But if those aren't aligned to strategy, right, you kind of need to ask yourself, why are we doing this as an organization at all? Right. But if you
Yeah.
can get really focused, I think you can get enough governance up there to say, these are the things that we anticipate will really move the needle. These are our hypothesis. This is how we'll track it. We understand the risk of it. Let's go forth and start these pilots in a very intentional manner.
So basically, if I flip what you just said, is one of the most certain ways to have a failed pilot or failed AI transformation is approaching it as a tactical thing instead of a strategical thing. So it should go all the way from the heart of the business and in alignment with the business. Because if you have one department and they have a great idea and they say, oh, we need to do this and blah, 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 and this is going to be great for us. Well, that's good, but that is not coming from the alignment of the business. And then if you have every department that is doing it, they're basically tearing the business apart. Like because one guy is going that way, another department is going another way, and then you just scale the mess.
Exactly. Right. I talk about, people, trying to get everyone to pull the rope in the same direction. Right. And if you have all these people going in all these different directions, and they could be good tools
Uh-huh.
for that niche, for that piece of the business. Right. But if it's not aligned to the larger strategy, it's drawing attention, it's drawing resources, it's drawing capital out of those items that could really drive, an ROI for the business and help the
Uh-huh.
business serve their customers better. So keeping that customer centric kind of mindset, regardless of what business you're in, how are you serving those customers and how can we layer AI to amplify and accelerate the supporting of our customers better, faster, right, more efficient, right, is really where I think most businesses are better off focusing their energy rather than a lot of disconnected pilots trying to drive efficiency because
Uh-huh.
you can scale and get really good results, which is kind of the pillar 5 of my framework,
Uh-huh.
right? But if you scale horizontally across a number of pilots, like you you're not making meaningful impact, right? And those are the ones that you see fail.
Okay. Let's try to continue this logic. Let's say we as the organization, we have chosen that, okay, this is going to be our strategic yes to this AI initiative, one or two. Usually, in my experience, in my work day to day, I keep hearing in the field that you have a department, let's say, that was agreed, okay, we're going to do this pilot. Then usually, this department has to map the workflow, map the whole process. They document everything, they have everything in paper because they need to explain to AI what needs to be done and how. And then once you do this and then you put AI into work, it starts hitting decisions that nobody never wrote down because it's very easy to map the process. But once you have a guy that has been doing certain thing for 2 years in a row and he's the best in the company or in their department in doing it, they have a lot of workarounds, a lot of tacit knowledge, like that really it's impossible to document it simply because for a person it will take tremendous amount of time and it's very hard explaining all those nuances. So that's what I see in my day to day. I'm curious, how does that resonate with you? Do you run into that? Do your clients run into that? And if you do, what have you found out about this kind of problem?
Yeah, I mean, definitely see it, right? And it really boils down to a context problem, right? In
Hmm.
AI, we talk about context management and these kind of items.
All the time.
That person that's built 2 years of knowledge and intuitive kind of thinking to move things through the process, they have that 2 years of context, right? That
Hmm.
is trapped in their brain, right? So I
Hmm.
definitely see that because the AI then doesn't have that same context. So it doesn't make the same decisions. And you start questioning, why did that come out of this AI? I think the approach that I've seen work more than documenting current processes, and that's important, right? But is really asking, what should the process be, right? And taking the
Hmm.
opportunity, right, to leverage AI as a lever to really reinterrogate how work gets done at a more fundamental level, right?
Hmm.
Because what I found in interrogating processes and asking, like, how do you actually do that work? If you talk to the people like on the keyboards doing the day to day work, a lot of times it's not the process that's documented, right?
Hmm.
It's not, I mean, there's little nuances to it. And
Yeah.
you ask kind of, why do you do that? And there's a system issue, or there's, a legacy piece of software over here, or this is just the way we've done it, right? So really looking at those processes and asking, why is that the process? Should it be the process?
Hmm.
Eliminating steps in the process, right? And making those processes more efficient first, I think honestly provides a lot more results than some of the AI tooling on top of legacy bad processes. It also gives you the opportunity then to understand, okay, AI is really about taking the information, making a decision, right? Or empowering a human to make a decision,
Hmm.
right? Faster with better quality. What data do you need? How do you do it? And really partnering those humans with the AI, right? In a continuous feedback loop to build more reinforcement learning into those AI so that they the AI, whichever tool and technology that you use, starts to build context with the human operator. And then you are allowing it to scale to more agentic, giving it more agency to operate on itself as you've partnered with it,
Hmm.
right, to really build the context necessary to make the right decisions. But I think if you just add
Okay.
AI onto existing workflows, you find those context gaps where the humans have it and the AI doesn't, and you're just amplifying, accelerating legacy debt, and you're just building additional tech debt just with a new tool.
Yeah, at that moment you either need to figure out the way how to capture all that context or follow the path that you mentioned. I feel that you're a big proponent of, eliminating before you really automate anything or before you really dig deeper into that process. I'm curious, how do you usually navigate the conversation with, or not just you, like, because there are some businesses that require AI outcomes today, right now, or like tomorrow, show us the numbers, show us the proofs. And for those kind of guys, it's very hard to explain that first we need to optimize the process. First, we need to understand what needs to be eliminated. And only then we start doing AI because some boards or some executives, they require AI to be done. Like they want to see amplification today and right now. But
Yeah.
what do you usually see as the cost that shows up later in terms of time? So the process usually breaks at the moment when, if you do not really eliminate anything, you just have a lot of exception queue, or what's usually the main problem and the main cost after if you do not eliminate?
I think it goes back, right, to being very strategic about where you choose to apply AI and for what purposes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you talk to boards, executive teams, there's this big push for AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're asked why that push, it's accelerate, it's efficiencies, it's all these kind of items.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at all the things the business does, right? How it serves its customers, and you then understand where would AI be very good at amplifying and accelerating that thing? Because AI is not a magic pill. It's not going to solve everything for everybody, right? There's a lot of hype and there's a lot of use cases for AI where it's not going to provide the lever, right? But then you can build kind of that heat map to understand what is going to move the needle. And then you can put your AI strategy around that and tell the board, hey, this is where we're going to apply AI, right? This is going to get us the biggest bang, right, for the buck, right? And the biggest lever for us to really accelerate and move the business forward. And I think you can get there very quickly, right? And if you get down to those one or two and saying, oh, what are the processes, right? And not looking at the entire end to end process, but really asking the people that are running the process, where are those efficiencies? Looking at and doing that value stream mapping to find those very specific spots where you can apply it. I think you can find those in days to weeks and then apply AI very strategically to those elements to really produce results, not in 6 months, right? Not in 3 quarters, right? But in 6 to 8 weeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
even faster, depending on the size of the organization. So I think it can go very quickly, right? But you have to kind of look at those processes, right? And understand not to address everything. Because I think there's a lot of organizations that, when we talk about eliminating parts of process reengineering, understanding and documenting the processes,
Mm-hmm.
they just start with, let's document our current processes without necessarily understanding where those processes are broken and where AI can be a lever to improve them. Because then you can start there and then move out from there, but you got to show results quickly, right? So getting targeted on where to do that. And then as you evaluate those, it's like, okay, what is causing that? Well, there's, this back and forth of this data, right? Too many hands on this process. Okay, why are there too many hands in this process? Can we eliminate some of those people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean roles, but you have people in the process of moving a you know, NDA through a system or a legal review or
Yeah, because
like,
maybe that's the thing that they're doing is a result of an edge case that was formed 5 years ago. And now everybody already forgot why they're doing things like that. They were, oh, we always used to do it like that. So with AI, you have a chance to kind of like observe the house that was already built and just build a new house with using new technology, new materials that's going to function better, faster. And yeah, I
Yeah.
agree with
I
you.
mean, it's when I think of AI and applying it, especially like generative AI, applying it in different workflows, intelligent process automation, right? You, you, you start small, right? I think of it like software development. Think of a lot of things, right? But people oftentimes throw things at the wall to see what works. So they start way too many pilots, right? They think AI is going to radically transform their entire business. And I do believe that to be a true statement, but you can't start there, right? You have to start with like, how are we going to get the organization ready for AI? How are we doing change management? How are we educating people? How are we looking at process engineering? And really look at it as transforming the whole business, but starting from a very small, very targeted, very strategic catalyst, and then building out from there.
Let's talk about your initiative, why AA fails. And by the way, it's a very anti-fragile kind of naming and position, because right now in the industry, everybody mostly publishes successful case studies about things that went right and keeps really silent about things that went wrong. What is the failure pattern that you observe right now? What is the thing that repeats itself in most of the teams and companies that you observed when they are thinking about or doing something in AI?
I think it fundamentally boils down to lack of alignment and lack of strategy on where they're applying it. That's
Mhm,
really what it boils down to,
mhm,
right? If I look at the case studies that succeed, right? The common pattern is very strategic application, right? Very targeted to a specific use case, right? That
mhm,
really moves the needle, right? And provides results. And then finding the next one that provides results, the next one, right? 95% that fail. And that number might be a little bit high, right? You saw the study last year, which is kind of where the name of the book, right? And some of those kind of came from, meant to be a little bit, provocative, right? But the vast majority that fail is because they never defined what success looks like up front, right? They didn't understand like how are we measuring this, right?
mhm,
And they spend days, weeks, months putting AI into a process that didn't need to exist, right? Or they didn't have the right data to make the decision, right? Or it was being done in a way, on the ground floor that wasn't, in the documentation, right? And the people weren't talking to understand those nuances, right? And it's those lack of alignment and understanding how the business actually operates, what they're actually trying to do, and putting together a very strategic process, right, to evaluate and understand where AI can be applied and then making the appropriate tool selections, understanding the risk and then scaling it, right? But
mhm.
it's that trying to do everything all at once and AI everything isn't a strategy, right? So you're not being specific and intentional. And it's really just, I think, a failure of following, you know, fairly basic leadership principles that have existed
Laser
for
beam.
decades. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
it's
It's
back to
very interesting.
basics.
I actually want to ask you a follow-up question here. Do you mostly see that in this 95% that fail because the strategy just was never part of the equation, do you see that most of those initiatives are um, internal? So the team started building because they were building, or you see those are decisions where the company or the team bought a solution in terms of AI, something that they have found on the market, and then it's still, the lack of strategy is present in both cases. But I'm curious, what is the difference that you see? Is it 50-50 between what they buy and what they build internally? How does it split?
I mean, I want to say it feels kind of 50-50, right? I've seen where executives, board say, we need to do AI. And they find a tool
Mhm,
or something, have a conversation. And they're like, we need to go apply AI here. Right. And then, IT teams, data science teams, right? Different groups are trying to figure out how to implement this thing, right? Very tactically. Right.
mhm,
And they don't understand how it ties to strategy. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Right. But there's a disconnect and those groups can't articulate what the strategy is. So there's this disconnect that not everyone's on the same page. I've also seen it where groups, right? And I've led large IT organizations, smaller IT organizations, right? Software development groups, right? Where it's like, we need to go faster, right? Or we're getting pressure from CFOs or CEOs or others to be more efficient financially. So those small teams go and try to implement AI to drive efficiency, right?
Hmm.
But it's to meet cost drivers or those kind of items. And certainly those are important. But whenever you start there, it's not aligned to kind of where the organization's trying to go, right? Or how they're trying to deliver value for their customers. So then you see the disconnect, right? And then you see spend kind of start to go out of control for all of these AI initiatives. Or CFOs rightly asking, like, where's the ROI on that AI initiative? Right? We're now spending a considerable amount of money and we're not seeing the results, right? Without being able to articulate a longer term vision or alignment to strategy, right? So I see it kind of both sides. So I'd call it 50-50, right?
Hmm.
And I think it just depends on where organizations are in kind of that organizational maturity curve, right? I see newer, scrappy startup kind of companies really pushing AI more from the top of the board and like, hey, we got to be there first, right? First mover advantage and those kind of things, which may be real, right? But is that really where you're competitive in the market, right? And larger
Yeah.
organizations that are more dispersed, bigger teams, I see AI popping up in these little pockets that are
Hmm.
not that are disconnected, right? So it feels a little bit different based on organization size and maturity.
That makes total sense. And it's very interesting. I'm curious for the closing. As you mentioned, there is 5% of teams that actually make it in terms of AI implementation. And we already digested in this episode that the most important thing is strategy. Like, if you think that your constraint is the budget or like the size of your team or the vendors that you're working with, it's not really that. Everybody can fail if you did not have strategy. So what would be a next step for the company that you would recommend? Let's say they sit down, they boil down, okay, we were focusing on strategy. What is the second most common thing, most common factor of success that you see across those 5% that actually do make it?
I mean, from the ones that do make it, right? And they sit down, everyone can kind of articulate where the organization's going. They got the strategy, the leaders are aligned. They start
Hmm.
to build the capabilities, right? They're running pilots, they start to scale them, right? Is looking at the risk of them and then evolving kind of those over time is like pick that next big rock, right? That really has the opportunity to be successful with AI, right? Focus all of kind of the institutional energy, right,
Hmm.
on solving that one problem, right? That aligns with strategy, that provides a lever, right? And it doesn't have to even be a large investment. It's just very specific and targeted, right? And go kill those small little AI initiatives, pilots that you're not sure if they're providing value. If you're not sure, they're probably not. Right.
Hmm.
And if you're not, 100% that they are aligned to where the organization needs to go, they're just taking energy, they're taking cash from things that can actually move the needle. Right. And once you start to get that flywheel going, right, just starting with identifying that thing that's most important, you really start to get a lot of institutional energy. Right. And you start to see acceleration of AI programs and projects and solutions and workflows be adopted more widely across the organization.
Hmm.
But it's hard to move a large organization. So you have to start somewhere. So if you have the strategy and you know where it's going, define that in kind of your AI strategy that aligns directly to it. Pick one project that really has potential for value, identify the KPIs and go do it. But stop doing everything, right? Because AI, all the things, isn't a strategy.
Strategize and do not disperse.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah. I think of it a little bit like agile software development. It's like, oh, let's start. What's our MVP?
Yeah.
Like, let's build that and then let's add features and functionality, right? You're not building necessarily one capability or one software. You're building a platform and an ecosystem and capabilities for the business, right? I'd argue if you're doing it right, right? But just pick something very meaningful to start and get the flywheel moving.
This was a lovely conversation full of insights. I learned myself a ton. Neil, what is the best way to reach you if the viewers or listeners want to get in touch? How they should do it?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to kind of reach out is, LinkedIn. So, Neil D. Morris on LinkedIn, or yaifails.com is the link for the book and the website that associates with it. And there's the 7 pillars there and some reach out buttons and all of those kind of things. And, I love talking about this with different companies. Encourage everyone kind of, do reach out. Let's continue the conversation. A massive pivot point for technology, IT, business, and I really frightened of AI because it can be used for nefarious purposes as well as good. But I'm also very excited about how we can leverage AI in businesses to really serve our customers better. How we can use AI in healthcare and other areas to really provide better results for patients and do better manufacturing and be more efficient. I'm a super fan of it, but I see a lot of it fail. So whatever I can do to help your organization succeed, I'm all there for it.
Amen. Thank you so much for coming to the episode.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure.